with fall sports then being shifted back to what's now being termed season 1, beginning on February 1st. So from there, the steps that ended up taken, that really end up becoming important are then the roadmap to recovery reports that are coming out. If you go back a day before that WI decision, and you have the governor's new mandates, and I'm going to keep calling them that because again, they're not recommendations anymore. These are mandates. These are things that we have to follow to get sports up and running. One of the things that came out of those mandates is that there will be these weekly reports. So we'll go over that in just a little while too. The first one, I want to point out a couple things that I noticed and see if people are thinking the same thing. And then we'll get to what I'm sure everybody is really interested in today, and that's the healthy, the clarifications to the governor's guidance, the healthy sport guidelines from the WI that came out yesterday. We'll end up talking about those. So just first, I just want to hear, hear from folks, or give folks an opportunity to talk about this if they'd like. With the decision made by the executive board last week, what did that do for your league? Did it solidify that you're going to, fall in lockstep with the WI and their decisions to change seasons around, and now you're going with the season 1 dates, and you're waiting until January 19th, and you'll find out what the rest of your sports are doing? Or did it solidify for your league that it was time to just say, we're moving a different direction and we're going to come up with our own plan? I just want to take a couple minutes, so we don't need to take a long time, and get into specifics about each plan, but just where are you guys around the state? What are other leagues doing, other areas of the state? Seattle Times showed that the Metro League is actually going with a 2-season approach starting on February 22nd. That was announced in the Seattle Times yesterday. So open it up. People want to share, just jump in, turn your mic on and jump in.
Jeff, the Emerald Sound just applied yesterday to start with fall, but we want to delay the start February 1st too soon. We have applied to start with fall sports on the 15th of February.
Okay, so pushing it back a couple weeks. Okay.
And we have not decided on season 2 or 3. We are still planning on 3 seasons, and we're going to wait until next week to address season 2.
Okay. And Scott, are you guys going back to your individual school districts to talk to them about support for the plan? Are you?
Yes. Of the 14 schools in our league, 13 are planning on being a part of fall sports. 1 is opting out of the fall, but is still open to join in at some point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then Aaron, thank you. So if you want to jump in and end up talking about that a little bit, Aaron, you could do that too.
Jeff, I got a little news. This is Bob down at Olympia High School. Yesterday, the South Sound Conference made the brave and wise decision to regionalize based on the Road to Recovery plan. And in doing so, Olympia High School is joining with the other Thurston County high schools. We're 4A school, they're all 3A. And we're going to join what we're going to call the South Sound South to get us through the first season, because we believe that'll give us a better chance to start, as opposed to having to deal with 2 different regions in this Inslee plan. And so right now we've got a few 3A, 4A combined leagues that haven't been before.
So what I think I just heard you say, Bob, is that you guys are breaking away from your traditional league structure, and then just saying, okay, we need to stay kind of local and come up with a framework that's going to give us a better chance of getting kids back out on the field.
That's correct. And that's for season 1, pending other information as things go forward. And we're going to meet tomorrow to talk about dates. So we can't answer your first question, but I think we may see more leagues have to do that, particularly when you throw in the transportation angles that people haven't really talked about. Yeah, the goal, I think, as Russ said before we got here, is we got to get the kids on the field, whatever we got to do.
Thank you. Jerry, do you want to talk about the Northwest Conference proposed schedule?
We moved with a schedule before we left for break. I know Mike McKee's on here too. He could probably talk a little bit about it, but we had already moved towards moving away from the traditional proposed exec schedule by the exec board. So we put together a schedule that allowed for us to start with fall first, and we had it built so it stepped out all the way to March 1st. So there was always these what ifs. What if we can't start February 1st? What if we can't start February 8th? What does that look like? So I just shared our Google Doc that has that. There are tabs down below that walk out 5 weeks of backing out. So we could start anywhere from February 1st to March 1st and still have a semblance of a season for all 3 seasons, given that we could start March 1st. It goes down to, I think, as small as a 5-week season for some sports in there, but it's an opportunity for us to get our kids on the court, on the field with our coaches. So that was what we were looking at. And we tried to do the best we could to preserve as much time for spring in there. So as you step out of those weeks, spring doesn't shrink until kind of last case scenario. So that was our thought as we put this together and move forward with our idea. So
thank you. That built-in protection for spring, I think, is what a lot of people are, kind of putting it as one of the most important elements of any plan that's getting built. Julie, I see, and I've gotten to see Wesco's plans. If people haven't seen those, Wesco had reported that they were going to go to 3 seasons starting February 22nd, but they do have a contingency plan in there. And their plan B is then to stack seasons and have 2 seasons starting on March 8th. So they could have longer seasons that way. So I've heard, 4 or 5 different plans right now that are all on their own. Is there any league right now that is just adamant that they're going to stay with strictly the WIA calendar?
Hey, Jeff, I'll go ahead and speak for over here, Yakima Valley. Everything's on the table as far as I know. I mean, other guys can speak up, but we still haven't made decisions. We're looking at regional, going regionalized, but that divides up leagues. That's probably what we'll do. But everything's on the table. We definitely want to try to start February 1st, but we're waiting for you guys to figure it out, and then we're going to follow you.
No pressure there, that's for sure.
Hey, Jeff, the 1A Evergreen in District 4, I wouldn't say we're adamant about starting, but we're going to attempt to start as it's written by the WIA with all the entire lineup that we offer. Okay.
And that's good. Thank you, Annette. I appreciate that clarification too. That was I chose that adjective very, for a very specific reason. So, and I think in my mind, part of what's really important for executive board reps to continue to hear is, and I know if Mick is getting these applications, and then the staff are going to be looking at them also, that they need to know how many leagues. If there are 45 leagues around the state and there's 4 that are thinking that the February 1st date is the right one, for example, that I think that's really relevant information for them when they meet again on January, and they need to be thinking about those kind of things too. So 2A SPSL, another one. Okay, that's fantastic. I think one of the things that may end up being helpful for everybody is, and I don't know, maybe BJ, maybe, and Andy, maybe you guys can help me out here. Is there a way that, and Jim, I'll come back to you in just a second here, but is there a way for these plans as they are finalized, can we all find them someplace? Can we see what other leagues are doing? Because I think, one of the things that I got to imagine some of us are feeling, I'll speak for my own experience, that I'm starting to get is the eternally optimistic families, the eternally optimistic athletes. They see a February 1 date and they say, things are back to normal on February 1st, just get it going. It's not that big a deal, not understanding some of the complications and some of the other elements that need to go into planning these things. And if we can help each other out by just showing that, hey, if there are 45 leagues in the state, and out of the 45, 40 of them are actually going to push that start date back. I think that ends up helping everybody, right? So that everybody can end up showing that to their communities as well. So Jim Meyerhoff, go ahead. Tell us about SPSL 4A.
So we might, I don't know if this is unique, but we're in two different situations where the first one is we have 3 different regions in our 10-team league. Puget Sound, and then the Thurston County, and then Kitsap County. And as of last week, we had 10 schools. As of today, we have 8. Thurston County, like Bob just mentioned, is Olympia is going to play down there, and South Kitsap will be joining the Kitsap schools so that there's no confusion between whether they can or can't go. The other issue we have is that we have 2 school districts, Sumner and Bethel, that have schools in 3A and 4A, so 2 different leagues. Weirdly, they ended up being the same plan. The plan is basically the WIA plan, very similar. We did move tennis based upon just footing and dealing with that. But we also have a February 1 start date for football and February 8th for everything else in the fall sports. We also know that, well, we did that because we didn't want to be have parents looking at us and saying, why aren't we going if we can? Knowing that we can move back if we need to versus trying to rush everything forward. So we do understand there's that possibility that we may have to make some adjustments, hoping that the Puget Sound region gets there. We also have a couple schools like Peninsula and Gig Harbor who are looking for homes in the Pierce County area because they also have Thurston County and Kitsap County schools that are in the same spot. So that may be an adjustment for us. We have a few things going on at our meeting today at 10 o'clock.
Jim, I hope you have picked up some meditation techniques. That sounds like an awful lot of stress trying to juggle all those different complicating factors.
Yeah, the good part is we have good people doing it. So everybody on this call is doing the same.
Yeah. The thing that I hope everybody continues to hear is that each one of these leagues, each one of these conferences is approaching this from the perspective of what is best for the kids at each one of the individual schools. And if that means that we need to break apart our traditional league structures because of being in 3 different regions to give kids an opportunity to play, then people are looking at it and saying that's actually something that's going to be allowed. And John, no, I haven't shared Kinko. So if you want to jump in and share what we're talking about in Kinko right now, go ahead.
I was happy to yield to let you do it.
That's all right.
So we have, I would say the absolute we have right now is not a February 1st start date. We have some proposals going forward on what seasons could look like should the metrics allow us to get there. Kind of our first step is to see how our 9 different school districts feel about that. Go Cougs, Dave. Thanks for throwing that in. Once we get our districts on board with the possibility of allowing their athletes within their district to participate in those types of things, then we'll take the next steps. As I've heard Jeff mention and a few others, I think Jerry mentioned it as well. There's a lot of obstacles beyond just the season. There's a lot of variables that take place to be able to put athletes on the field and on buses if that's possible. What schedules look like, how long the seasons are. So certainly going forward with plans to put kids out there, but the February 1st date in Kinko is off the table at this time.
And John, that's actually a pretty good segue into the next step that, everybody right now, is really going to be held to this Department of Health report that comes out each week. And what I'm doing is I'm just sending you a link to the report. I'm going to share it with you right now. I'll share my screen. We'll end up jumping in and take a look at what this thing looks like. Here we go. Did that share? Okay. So, it's weird. I'm not saying things normally, but that's okay. So what each week is going to happen through the Department of Health is that they are going to put out, they have their dashboard up so people can look at things on a daily basis. And then what they're going to do every Monday is they're going to put out, or every Friday, they're going to put out this roadmap to recovery report, and they'll keep updating it. They give the background, they give the phase by region, and then they give this chart. This chart is really kind of the key to the whole thing. And what it shows is, the light blue is where people in each region have actually met the metric that is actually being mandated to us to move to phase 2. So I'll use the Puget Sound region as an example. We met the metric in the 14-day trend in new COVID cases per 100,000 with a minus 27%. We did not meet the 14-day trend in the new COVID-19 hospital admissions, right? We were positive there, so we didn't meet that. Our average 7-day percent of occupancy of ICU staff beds, we met that because we're under 90. And then the 7-day positive COVID-19 tests, we were under that at 7%. Now, what I want to point out are the dates, the time period. Because if you look at the calendar, today is the 13th of January. And if you look at where these percentages and where these metrics are coming from, they're coming from as far back as November. And all of us are really, really acutely aware that things were a lot different in November than they are today. And if you take a look at what happened over the last 12 days, just individually, day by day in your particular area, the numbers are not necessarily great. So what does this say to me? And this is just me personally talking. This is not any expert. I'm definitely not an expert or anything in this area. But what I'm going to tell you, just a layman looking at it, is that these numbers are likely not going to look as positive next week. That's what it tells me. And I think every one of us has the, kind of the responsibility to make sure that we're looking at these in a responsible fashion. And what I mean by that is this, that we end up, giving false hope or giving false optimism to community members or to somebody else that all of a sudden, because we've got 3 right now, that next week we'll be at 4. It'll be okay. We'll be able to just, take the reins off and start going. That's not necessarily a realistic way to look at it. So we need to be real careful and need to understand what we're looking at. And what the Department of Health and the governor's office in releasing this every week, what they have been real clear to say is that they are slow in collecting this information because they want to make sure it's accurate. So they are, they're really, and I can't see the chat while I'm sharing right now. So if you guys are, turn your mic on and share something if you want to. They end up giving you the data sources and everything else, and they say what they do. They consider the most recent 16 days of data from the negative tab labs data set to be incomplete. So they don't use the latest set. They end up using the latest complete set. So we need to make sure we understand that. So people are going to be looking at different things, and we have to be able to say to our communities, this is what we have to go by, period. It doesn't matter what it says today. This is what we have to go by. So are there any questions about that?
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
Ron Lepper, Mount Baker High School. I understand all that. My big concern with the rollout now too is this fact that we could meet the metrics, we could go ahead, and then the next Friday says, hey, you guys are over, you got to go back, and then we got to stop everything for a week. That's, looking at that really concerns us up here. It concerns me all over the state, but that, to me, that's really not going to be very good for kids.
Yeah, I use this analogy the other day. I don't ever remember going to school, to learn how to lead a yo-yo. And the last thing I think any of us want to do is end up putting a plan in place and releasing things too quickly so that we're actually yo-yoing kids back and forth. I think we risk doing more damage to kids by doing something too early, too quickly, and then having to yank them back and then try and move them forward and yank them back and move them forward. And all we're doing is changing schedules, that kind of thing. So I agree with you, Ron. The other thing that needs to be real clear to everybody is that if that happens, if what Ron said happens, and the Puget Sound region, we move to phase 2, and then next week, we don't. It only takes it only takes one of those. You can drop or fall out of the range that's agreeable with one of the 4 categories, and you end up sliding back.
Jeff, that's not, Jeff,
Is
actually,
that 2? Is it 2?
you only have to hold or stay flat in 2.
'Cause I
And
read 3 the other day.
yeah, they had it in 2 different places. So in our conversations yesterday, they're saying hold or remain flat. You don't even have to continue to improve in 2 of the 4. And then the other thing they have stated is they're reserving the right not to have to move people back, because the last thing they want to do is have to move regions back, because it doesn't just impact us, it's restaurants, it's everything. And so it's still evolving, is my understanding, the procedures, and that's why we're seeing so much conflicting information. So you're right, we had one document from them that said 3, we had one that said 2. When we met with them, they said 2. So I just want to make sure, right now, that's what we're operating off of.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mick, and I'm going to give you my political statement, that if decision makers who are going to release mandates to people and tell them they need to follow mandates, don't have a clear picture of what that mandate is in their head, and provide conflicting information, they're not doing anybody any favors. And then saying that, yes, there is going to be a backslide, but then saying, no, we reserve the right not to do it. That's not doing anybody any favors also. So as you're talking to your contact, I would hope that you could find a nice way to make sure they understand that and they can get that piece clarified for everybody in a very straightforward fashion, because it's going to help people make decisions, I think. Because and Ron, you can tell me if you agree with this, right? But what I believe is that that's actually going to be a major deciding factor for a lot of school districts.
Yeah, it is, because we don't want to jump, like you said, jump into it. Because let's say right now, I got phone calls from parents. Hey, those numbers look good. And I said, yeah, but look at the dates, and we know that. But it'd be, just the idea that just keeps me awake at night. The idea that we get started and then a week or 2 weeks in, we got to pull back for a week. That just doesn't. That's not feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not positive for anybody at this
But
point.
I'm glad that what Mick said, that makes a lot more sense. If we can go to hold 2 and stay there, then I think we got a great chance of keeping that going, if we can get to that point.
I think that's probably true. I would agree with you. I think that's probably true. Okay, is there anything else with the roadmap to recovery? Everybody's feeling okay about that particular information, and you know where to find it. You can find the dashboard and all of that. Any other questions about that? Anybody feeling really down? I mean, you said you wanted some inspiration. Is anybody feeling really down? Do they need to be lifted based on the data that they're seeing right now? I would say, if I'm going to spin it in a positive fashion, in the Puget Sound region, what I can say is that it certainly looks like the projections are in a downward trend in a couple of those areas, in about a week or so. So I think we're going to go up and then come back down. And what I can certainly hope is that something like this, the hope of doing something, is going to influence people to continue to make good decisions for themselves, to end up helping the process along. And Lauren, jump in. Yeah, I saw your hand jump up there too.
Jeff, I just thought I'd add, when you think about this small sample size that we're looking at right now, once we get a couple weeks under our belt, we're going to start to realize how the numbers really shake out, because it seems kind of secretive to me. It's just not transparent, because I don't even know what the hell they're trying to project to me. But I guess it kind of gives all the more credence to what we were talking about with Olympia going to the Thurston region and maybe playing in North Central. We decided we would regionalize, and I give kudos to the Yakima guys, because all of our leagues between North Central and where Yakima and Tri-Cities are in the Southwest, or South Central, we cross leagues. And so all of our leagues are crossing 2 regions. And basically the people that I've talked to said, we're not going to hold you back. If you guys can play, go play. And so that's why we devised our system, where we're going to tier it out. What I mean by that is we have Bs all the way to 4As, and it's a big region all the way from the Canadian border down to below me, out south of I-90. And so we're going to try to play within that one region and build 2 or 3, maybe 4 tiers per sport. So depending on the sport, a B school doesn't want to play a 4A school. They won't come together and be in a cross country meet. So, I mean, those are just things that we're going to try to tackle today as we meet after this. But I would just say maybe that gives credence to other people's thinking about regionalizing versus just staying within your own league that might cross 2 different regions.
That's, thank you, Lauren. That's fantastic. I agree with you. I think anytime we can end up really kind of thinking beyond our own needs and end up doing what's going to be best for other schools and other kids, it's going to end up helping everybody move forward right now too. The data, going back to what you said, that the idea of transparency and not even understanding what it is that that's being sent to you and everything. The thing I would encourage you to do is to take a look at the dashboard, and what is what we've all gotten used to doing is taking a look at our own county's dashboard. And what the state has done now is they've taken and they've compiled county information and everything else and put it into one place. And you're able to see some comparisons. You're able to see some things. I think they're continuing. It certainly looks like they're continuing to build that particular website to make it more user friendly. But it's all in one place at that point. And what they also have when you're taking a look at the daily dashboard there is you have projections. And so as they ended up putting into the Roadmap to Recovery report, that they're only utilizing the accurate information, and so the last 16 days is not reflected in the numbers. What they're able to do is show you based on what they have for those 16 days, what they believe is going to end up happening with the numbers. So you can actually start to project out and potentially get ahead of what may be happening in your particular region by taking a look at that. It's a conversation Applegate and I had yesterday. We were both looking at that dashboard rather than looking at the report and thought, good grief, why are the numbers so different right now? And that's why. Because we were looking at things just on the dashboard rather than looking at the report. So I would encourage everybody to do that and just make sure that you So Kenneth, I think what Mick just said is that okay, so there we go. So Kenneth has a question, Mick. So the document last night says to stay in phase 2, regions must meet at least 3 of the 4 metrics. And,
right. So the reason we did that is, we had so many ADs clamoring for the document, and we don't have the final clarification from Department of Health. So we erred on the high side. There's a lot of holes still out there. We were not included in their planning dialogue. All of a sudden, back on the 4th, we got wind that they were dropping new guidelines. And in a very brief conversation, in somewhat very vague language, I was told from the governor's office, they're going to be completely different metrics and different phasing. And so that's why we canceled the board meeting that day, is we didn't want to have our board members come in and we didn't have the information. Once we saw that, we got it at the same time everybody else did when the governor released it in his press conference. We actually have a liaison now assigned to us from the Department of Health. So the communication cycle between us is much better. So we spent all day yesterday going back and forth with different questions. So that's why that's on there. I am anticipating, I'm watching my email, hoping to get a response this morning from them, but I'm assuming we'll get confirmation one way or another. In our conversation last Thursday, they told us it was 2 metrics. The documentation they had out, everybody is working off, said 3 metrics. So we left it high. Again, we don't want to create false hope and pull something back. We'd rather give more opportunity. That's why it's really important that we're updating our website continually, and Casey and Andy have a plan to show as those updates go. So I know some people are asking, hey, can we have your document and edit it? We don't want to do that because we don't want to create more confusion. There's so many documents. If you want to take ours and cut and paste and put something on a league letterhead or school, by all means, communicate how you need to. We just don't want one that mimics ours that all of a sudden it's the 3 versions ago from 8 a.m. and we've changed it that many times by 2 p.m. because we're literally updating in real time as we can. Couple things on the metrics. We are in dialogue right now on that second metric. As Jeff's example was, they hit all the numbers except for number 2. And if you look at hospitalizations over 14 days, those don't seem to be in rhyme and rhythm or in sync with the other metrics in a variety of ways. There's some that people are really close in some metrics and way off there and vice versa. And so again, we asked last week when we got these metrics if there had been any analysis done over the previous few months to see, like, are these going to work? Like, what's the chance? And nothing like that's happened. And we don't have the data to do it ourselves. We could go back in and make some estimates. I know Ryan Poplinski did a really nice job of doing some of that early on. He was fairly close. So that tells us that there's some hope, but we're going to continue the dialogue on that one because, we have to hit all 4. We know that to go in. They did state over and over in that meeting that the last thing they want to do is push people backwards. And so as long as we continue to see somewhat flat or a continual decline, the assumptions, I believe, based on our conversations are accurate, that in 2 to 3 weeks, once we get through this, what they're anticipating as the surge from the holidays, including New Year's, that we'll start to see a drastic change. Hopefully vaccinations will be up and we'll start to see that impact, but that could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. We don't know, right? So the areas that are ready to start, the board wanted to make sure you had the chance February 1st. The other piece is that in the document we put out last night, and I'm assuming most of you are doing this, we were reading it literally. When we were reading it as outdoor high-risk sports, we were thinking football. Well, outdoor high-risk sports also means if you're wrestling outside, right? So that's a flip in thinking. So in phase 2, outdoor high-risk sports, we can play football. Well, that would also mean, right, and we've asked the question, and they told us yes yesterday, that would also mean you could hold a wrestling match outdoors. You could play basketball outdoors under the same guidelines as football. So that is a drastically different way to look at this. Your cheer and dance competitions could go outside. Their comment to us was, oh, we did not think of it that way, right? Because they're thinking like us, traditional indoor, outdoor sports when you're labeling them. It's really where they are being played at. And if you look at our document, Casey was intentional in putting that on there, that in the middle of it on that colored sheet with the phase 1 and 2, it says low risk, when conducted outdoors. So that's an important piece. So even in phase 1, there's quite a few options that you can do with your teams. Another point of clarity of a question I got today was, where it says under high risk conducted indoors, originally we were not given any opportunity for moderate or high indoors on the original document that came out last week. So we've been dialoguing on that. In the high risk indoors, you can do individual drills. So I'm going to use basketball as an example. So a young lady can be in there shooting free throws. She can be you can set up cones or chairs or however you do it, ball handling drills. To figure out how many you can put in that gym, you need to know your square footage, and you can have one kid for every 500 feet. They need to stay in their own bubble though. You can't have 2 kids in that same bubble, and they want a little buffer zone between them. So again, use some common sense. In the place where it says brief close contact, I know we're going to get the question, how long is brief? Again, that's your professional judgment. And what we are saying, and it's not really a cop-out, it's really where you should be going. Check with your risk management. There's 2 predominant groups out there that are risk management. We're working directly with Tim Yeomans on it, but they are the ones who need to advise you. If you're going to go play basketball outside and you say, hey, we got 2 courts. I had a school say, we got 4 outdoor courts. Can we run our league out there? Well, by the rules here you can, But if I was you, I would check with risk management because you're going to be playing in a totally different environment. And there's going to be probably different needs and restrictions and expectations for that your risk management's going to have to help guide you in. So that was for us on Thursday was a game changer just by asking the question. And I appreciate Tim Thompson because Tim was the one who brought it up. He said they normally run a middle school wrestling event, 4 mats in their stadium, have thousands of people coming in and out. So so where it's conducted is the key. So where they're listed, low, high, and moderate compared to where they are conducted. So that's a change in thinking that will need to be factored in. The last thing is the original document also said you could have 25% capacity indoors and you could have 200 maximum outdoors. So we got that clarified. For indoors right now, it's 25% of your fire code or 200, whichever is less. All right, so we've tried to put that on the document now. So indoors, the most you can have is 200 if you have a huge facility. But again, you need the physical distancing and all the other requirements that you would have. And that's only when you're at different levels of competition, depending on your phase. So again, I wish we had all the answers, and the push-pull on this is we know ADs. We had ADs yesterday calling, I guess, upset because the information went out before it went to ADs. Well, I'm telling you, if anybody can help us learn how to control the governor's office and the Department of Health communications, as well as media, right? I'm sitting in your class at WSSAAA. We are always going to try to get the information first to our ADs because we know your communities come to you, whether it's the school board or superintendent or the parent or the kid. So that is a priority of ours. But the other piece is we're learning to roll with this. We got to put our egos aside. We don't have all the answers. And all we can tell people when we don't have them is we don't have the answers, but we're going to go get it. Just like this metrics, 2 or 3 to go backwards, right? I've been told one thing and then I got something else on a document. We're waiting for confirmation. That's just the world we're living in right now. And we're going to turn that around as fast as we can. So I'm going to read some questions here unless anybody.
So Mick, I've been kind of following some questions, and Jim Beeson, I don't know if we really have a good answer to your question. Why don't they include someone from the office in the initial decision-making process? And that's a political question, but definitely that would end up helping what Mick just gave us a stump speech about too, right?
Yeah, I will say they're a lot better with that right now. So we really appreciate. I mean, they're picking up the phone yesterday. They're returning emails in the same day. So that has improved, but unfortunately we weren't part of the original dialogue.
Okay, Paul Huddleston, I think your question got answered about the high-risk indoor sports. Ryan Helms ended up asking a question about locker rooms, right? So we talked about cleaning of buses and athlete spacing and things like that, but there was nothing specific to locker rooms put in there.
Yeah, each of our sports have some language, I believe, to that. Is that right, Andy, Justin, BJ, Cindy? I think we've talked about when they should or shouldn't, and it's the same thing. Indoors, they want limited contact. In an ideal world, you wouldn't be using your locker rooms at all, especially in phase 1. So I would fall back on that and ask the team. I haven't dealt with that piece of it much.
Okay. And I thought I'd seen that also, is that there were some recommendations for locker rooms in each of the individual sport guidance. Not just general. DJ Helsley asked a question about basketball, and if you had a kid at a hoop, so if you have 6 hoops in your gym, if you just had 6 kids in the gym, each at an individual hoop doing shooting drills or shooting free throws or whatever it might be, doing dribbling drills, that you could do that in phase 1. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the individual training and practice.
Yeah, that's what it would look like to me too. That's what I would be calling it.
You got 3,000 square feet in that gym with 6 hoops. I sure hope so.
Chris, I Hartley ended up asking about keeping masks on during a wrestling match. I do know there's a couple other states that have actually done this. And what I'll commit to doing is trying to find an AD in one of those states to end up talking about how well that's actually worked. Okay, I'll commit to doing that for everybody before next week. So Cole, I think, I think what Cole is asking is kind of a segue into where we're going right now. So the WI's Healthy Sport guidelines are really what we should be taking a look at right now. What Mick sent yesterday to everybody gave a link to the state's sporting activity COVID-19 requirements. I think it's important for you to read those. I think it's important for you to understand what the state is talking about. And that's what the WI staff then is going back and figuring out how it applies to what we do. Okay. So the sporting activity COVID-19 requirements, they include professional sporting activities, school and non-school youth teams, college teams. They include all of that in there. And to get to the relevant portion of that, you got to get to page 3, right? You get past the professional, you get past the colleges, and you get to page 3. And then what Mick and the staff have done is actually taken what's in page 3 and in page 4 and in page 5 and 6, and then put it into the Healthy Washington Sport and Activity Guidelines that are on their webpage. Okay, so then what you can do is you can focus your attention on that. And Mick, if you disagree, tell me right now. But I think that's going to help people focus and not gather too much information and get too confused.
That's exactly our intent.
Okay, so focusing on that WIA document, it has their header up at the top, is actually where you should be going right now. And then I'm gonna I see that there's 14 questions in the chat. I'm gonna come back to that in just a bit. But what I want to do is turn to that healthy Washington Sport Guideline WIA document for a couple minutes, okay? And what I want to commend the staff on doing is this. They took this information that is in some ways woefully inadequate, coming from the governor and the Department of Health and everything else, because they keep it at a 50,000 foot view and without talking to anybody up front, and then they end up throwing it to you. And what you guys have been able to do is actually bring it down to about 10,000 feet. And I say that because it is absolutely impossible for you all to come up with a plan that gives every one of us everything we may need to have based on what our own local school district or school board or what our own policies and procedures and what our superintendents are comfortable with and everything else. So you've done a very good job of that, and I appreciate it. So reading through it last night, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I did want to make sure that that people had an opportunity to hear that. The important changes in this, and this is why Mick is, I believe, saying, just saying, well, I'm going to take the WIA logo off, and I'm going to put our league logo on it. It's not the right thing to do. You can take elements out of this and end up using them, and that makes sense. But just trying to turn this into your own document, it's going to continue to change. And what the big change right away is that they've altered the background for why the decisions are made. And that actually, I think, is key for everybody to be able to share with their community. And what I've heard over the last 72 hours or so from many different people, between coaches and parents, athletes and other school district personnel, is that there is this disconnect from decisions being made under the decision tree for going back to school, and this change that happened on the 5th of January that says, nope, sports now, you're now mandated to make decisions in a different place. And there is a disconnect there, and we need to make sure people understand where the decisions are coming from and why they're being made. That's the first element of this, and really important element of it. The second and a really important page is a summary page that ends up giving what everybody can do: low risk, moderate risk, and high risk sports in phase 1 and phase 2. And Mick and Andy and BJ and Justin and Cindy, I know you're on the call also. Thank you guys for breaking it up the way you did. And I'll see if I can share this with you guys also. So going back into the document, I think it is really, this is actually a really important page. Can you all see that page? This is a really important page because it ends up saying, you know, you have low risk, moderate risk, and high risk outdoors, and low risk, moderate risk, and high risk indoors, and what you're able to do in phase one and what you're able to do in phase two. You can see the language is similar in different areas and for different things, but at least it clarifies things for you. And this is what Mick was talking about. So if you have a high risk sport, no matter what it is, and you conduct it outdoors, this is what you're able to do. Well, that's fantastic. That makes things real clear for everybody. So if you want to have a basketball practice outdoors, you have a covered basketball court that you can end up utilizing. You can have a basketball practice outdoors. Okay, following these guidelines. Anybody have any questions about this particular page? This one, and I'll circle back. I'm going to say one thing about the low risk sports, swimming and diving.
Jeff,
Yeah.
you asked if there's any questions.
Yeah, I'll
I
come
think
back
for
to you in
this
just a
group-
second, Bob. I do want to point this out before I start taking questions about this particular page. Swimming and diving, anybody who is thinking about a swim practice or a dive practice, you've got to follow a different set of guidelines altogether. And pools are actually being held to a water recreation facility guidelines document that was actually given to every facility across the state back in late fall. So end of October, early November. And if you are thinking about then offering swim practices, either in the summer 2.0 or going into a season, the best thing for you to do is to go back to your pool operator that you're going to end up where you're going to practice and talk to that pool operator about what they can handle. And then you can start making your plans. Don't look at the phase one, phase two offering in this chart. Take a look at this guideline and talk to the pool operator. All right, Bob, go ahead. Ask your question.
I don't think there's a clear answer to this, but using this document, one of the questions that's coming up, and I think this group is be a great place to discuss the unintended consequences. But if I read this correctly, high risk when conducted outdoors can practice. So football can practice. And when I hear football practice, I'm thinking pads and helmets, and they can make brief contact. They can do drills, is permitted. Is that wise? Are we doing that? Are we going to do that? Particularly if football in your different regions is going to be the first sport out of the gate. How are people interpreting that area?
Anybody want to jump in and answer Bob's question?
Bob, I can tell you we discussed that as well. And all the same practice rules, the 20 contact and all that, the board made a decision. So that's the governance side of it. The common sense side is a great question because one of the factors that we're watching for in the proposals coming forward for alternate seasons is if people are moving football to the end, the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee has some concerns about any type of contact going beyond May into next fall, as well as too much contact in preseason before a season could start this year. So Justin and Andy have been working directly on that and can probably give you more details if you want on the governance and medical side.
No,
Justin?
I just want a clear decision. Should I be letting my football team practice on February 1st when we're in phase one?
Well, you can see it's pods of 6, right? So that was one question I saw. They originally said 5. In our discussion, they agreed to go to 6, and that they need to be brief. We would assume most coaches wouldn't do that. And if they're doing any type of thud or contact, in addition to being able to get the pre-practices before you could do contact and everything else, we don't really see that as feasible before February 1st to be in compliance with our regular rules. So the regular rules aren't thrown out. So they could do some shell drills, blocking, what have you, but not with contact. And I don't know how you would get enough kids in this situation ready to do anything more than that before the season. And once the season starts, you have to start those practices anyway. So it would make no sense to go to that extreme.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Couple other questions that I, as you guys were talking, I want to make sure we get an answer to them. Tim, I'm not sure. Tim Harrell asked a question about the logic of a cross-country athlete wearing a mask when they're out running, and if it's in the rain, then potentially waterboarding. I can't tell you whether there is logic behind it or not, except that typically cross-country runners are running in kind of tight packs, and what they're attempting to do is to make sure that they keep kids safe when they're out running and panting all over one another. So that's the only thing I can think of right there. So a couple other things that really have really come up, and one of them is listed in this particular chart, and that is, if you look at phase 2, the idea of a maximum of 200 people, including spectators, being outdoors, and there is a legitimate question there, and when we're talking about capacity to actually pull this off, we have regulations that we're going to have kids follow. We're going to have regulations that coaches have to follow. We're going to have, how is it that an athletic director is really, or a school or a principal is really going to want to try and determine who can come and watch a game? So using the biggest group that we have outdoors, you may not be able to have any spectator at a track meet because you may have 200 kids on the 2 track teams that are there anyway. So that sport wouldn't be able to have spectators potentially. So let's look at the next biggest, maybe a football team. You have, 50 kids on each sideline, plus coaches on each sideline, plus the officials, plus the people working. And all of a sudden you're at about 85. Well, how do you pick who gets to come and watch? Which 15 people are lucky? Is it Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Somebody's got to find a golden ticket and then they can go. Or do you want to really take on that type of headache? So I think that's something that ADs need to really consider as you're having conversations across your league. And what I would recommend is that a league is adopting a stance on that particular aspect of this particular chart, right? And it's the same, so that if I'm going to Eastmont, it's not I get to bring 10 people, but if I'm going to Wenatchee, I don't get to bring anybody. And then we're getting, I'm fighting with Jim, my community's fighting with Jim, but not with Russ, right? So I think that we need to make sure that we take that into consideration too. See, any other questions that came up in the chat that need to be answered before we move on right now? Good, Jim, that's fine. Okay.
Hey, Jeff, I have one really quick. I didn't quite understand. This is Annette Duval from Holcomb. I didn't quite understand the practice count for football in phase 1 versus and moving into phase 2 prior to competition. So the practice count in phase 1, will that be okay? And then in phase 2 opens, we can compete, or do we have to reestablish our practice count? Because when you look at the math on that, there's absolutely no way anybody will be able to play a game February 12th.
I'm gonna make an attempt, and then I can be scolded by the executives if I'm wrong on this. So if you're in phase 1 and you can practice, those practices would count, but you'd still be held to any rule related to being able to use pads before you can compete. So if you're in phase 1 and you can't put pads on, and you can't have your requisite number of padded practices before a game, and then all of a sudden you're in phase 2 on a Monday and have a game scheduled on Friday, if you can't get those requisite number of padded practices in, you wouldn't be able to have that game on Friday. Now, if I'm wrong, please, one of the executives scold me if I didn't get that right.
No, Jeff, I think you're on the right track with that. And we'll, as these questions come in, like Mick said, there's more questions than answers, but we'll kind of, piece those together for Q&A so people know exactly what the guidelines state.
What Mick said a couple of minutes ago, I think, is actually the real, kind of the real important element of all of this. You all are the WIA experts for your school. You know, there are going to be others that need to weigh in on a decision about what's going to happen with the kids in your school. But the one thing that you can provide to them is knowledge of the handbook. And what you have to remember is that once your season for your league starts, then the regular handbook rules, there are a bunch that are in play right now, but all regular handbook rules then go into effect. So the summer 2.0 is over. Some of the other waivers, you know, some of the other waivers are out of, you know, gone then. And you roll right back into rules for engagement of kids in athletics during a season are in effect at that point. And your knowledge of those rules are going to be really key in planning anything that's going to happen for kids moving forward. Okay.
So I'm still stuck on this football thing. Would it make sense? Would it make sense then for the WIA to put out a date of probably the potential first game day? Nobody's going to be able to play a game on the 12th of February. So it would make sense that we, as leagues, are not planning for that.
Well, right now, Annette, the you know, let's say every region was starting on February 1st. Then the first potential game date for football for each of those regions is really based on when they are moving to phase 2. And if four regions ended up moving on February 8th, their date would be different than the rest of them, right? So could the WIA end up making sure that there is a clear statement about how many days beyond moving from phase 1 to phase 2 that a region has to have in so that they could have all their padded football? Yeah, there could be, and that, I think that's what Andy is saying, that they would do in a Q&A. And that Q&A answer, which may in a regular year be pretty short and pretty direct, might need to be fleshed out just a little bit more.
Okay, so fair enough. That makes sense to me. But can we then run a football program and games after March 20th? Can we extend our season for a 6-week season once we hit phase 2 and the practice count to run that whole time?
Under the guidance that's been given to us already, if that's what your league is applying to the WIA to request, you know, then so that's where you know, where we saw just a little while ago, Wesco has a plan A and a plan B. So it would be kind of spelling out what that this is the problem that we've run into. This is how we want to address it, and then making sure that Mick gets that on the appropriate form. Then yeah, it would certainly seem like you would be able to do that. And again, if I'm wrong there, Mick or BJ or Andy, you know, just correct me there. But
yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many variables that there's no way we can possibly put a document out to cover all of them. I feel like if any of you deal with safety planning or security planning in your schools and you get a million what if questions once you do a presentation, we are going to be open to opportunity for students. You know, the question about why the February 1st date? Well, because if people are ready and able to go February 1st, then we want as much opportunity for students as possible. No different than the creativity you're doing. So, Annette, yeah, it is definitely a possibility, but we want a request coming in outside those parameters because we need to verify with officials that they can cover it. We want to make sure district directors are aware. So everybody, there's no surprises in regions. And we want to make sure that there's nothing that is maybe unforeseen that catches our eye. So I can't give you a definite yes or no, but so far we have not seen any reasons not to approve anything. But again, it's not a rubber stamp.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Jeff, this is Casey Gannett at Kalike and Mid-Columbia Conference. Taking that same concept, then in theory, soccer, which is currently a moderate risk sport outdoors, can practice 11 on 11 under the new rule. Would we be able to add or to look at those in phase 1, those practices, and count those towards the pre-practice requirements, knowing that the governor gives information on Friday, which goes into effect on a Monday? Would we be able to play on that next Tuesday?
I believe so. I believe so. Under what you just described, I believe you'd be able to, yeah.
And similarly with, I would assume with volleyball, since they can do pods of 6, those type of things would we'd be able to count those phase 1 practices as pre-practice requirements.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, Russ, Waterman, Eastmont, just if we could circle back a little bit to that one little clause in the reopening plan that talks about individual practice. So we're speaking, Mick spoke about basketball.
Yeah.
Individual skills in the gym. So if I could have by 500 square feet per athlete, 30 athletes in my gym broken up into 6 baskets, if they're working on individual drills, that would be legal.
Yeah, this is the way I thought about that, Russ. I thought about something similar, and you know, basketball practice in my mind is throwing basketballs out and having people shoot and do things that way. If you ended up taking the baskets out of the equation, then what are you doing? You're really moving more into a conditioning practice, and then the conditioning regulations for your venue, for your gym, would end up applying at that point. So yeah, I think if you ended up taking out the basketball practice element of what you're talking about, then yeah, you could probably have, based on your square footage in your gym, you could have more kids in there doing work.
So ball handling skills, that kind of stuff, rather than shooting where the ball's going to go everywhere off the rim and chaos.
Yeah, and just being and in pods of 6 and even being more restrictive in some ways and saying maybe we don't even do ball handling drills, maybe we're doing footwork drills and doing a variety of other things, then yeah, you're not going to run into an issue. And if Mick or Andy or anybody else was on these calls, what I've think I've read in that conditioning element in a gym like that you're also limited to the time that you're allowed to do that is limited also. I don't think that it's I think it's a 45-minute limit that you got there, right? So you'd have to get people in and have them work and then get out of there. Am I reading that wrong, Mick?
Well, and that was on the original document. This goes back to that 2 and 3 metrics for the backslide. The most recent one they sent out, it's not included.
Okay.
The time limit. And Russ, your example is exactly the one we brought to them. And then they came back with, yeah, you can do individualized drills. So exactly like Jeff said, not cross and pass. Again, I would go back, and this isn't being a politician, right, but check with your risk management. I know anytime you check with risk management, you get told no more than you get told yes. But I think with these guidelines, you'd get approval, and I would definitely have them weigh in, because that will give you some support if for some reason something comes up. We're going to do the same thing with some of these practice questions. Justin will work with our SMAC committee and make sure we're interpreting theirs right. And we're also going to check in with Tim Yeomans, who's the ombudsman for the risk management pool, just to make sure they're on the same page as us, because the last thing we want is information to come out from 2 different entities that you need to follow that are in conflict. So yeah, and we told them ADs are creative, right? We're literal, we're rule followers by trade, believe it or not, I told them. But we're also creative because we're looking for opportunities. So these are all kinds of questions, and I'm going to hit the mask thing real quick. I know it's an emotional issue, it's a personal issue in a lot of ways. The questions coming up are valid. We asked those questions, and we were told emphatically, mask at all times. We've asked the question. We've had some of our medical professionals on our SMAC committee go in and advocate for mask being able to make all sports moderate. And at this point, we do not have approval for any of that. And the answer, I think it was Jeff gave it on the running in packs. That was the concern, was the running in packs and cross country. So Justin's actually working on a proposal about interval starts. And if we could do some of that, would that change that and allow us to not go with masks? So, your questions are valid. Keep sending them our way. We're going to continue to keep asking, but right now it's masks at all times.
So real quick, Mick, is a gaiter a mask? And also, is there a, how they have like a P95 or some kind of a, something that the medical experts or whatever are wearing that are higher quality or whatever? Is there a actual style that is approved and an actual style that is not approved?
No, Annette, I was hoping to avoid that question today, but it's a great one. They have not specified what a mask is. We have the question in on the gaiter. We have the question in on the Schutt and Rydell face shields that have been approved. Our SMAC committee has approved them to be able to be used. We just need to know if it meets their qualification for a mask. So they have told us, we've been sending these questions. That's why we appreciate the questions. We're sending them directly to them, and they are working on their own FAQ. So they're going to incorporate ours in addition to others, because those go out to all community sports. So when you have questions, send them my way and they will get forwarded on. As soon as we get an answer, we'll get back to you. But I just don't have an answer for you, Annette. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, just to clarify what Russ was talking about, in phase one, a high risk sport indoor is not able to pod together. A high risk sport indoor is able to do individual work. So that would be one person on each basket, and you could cycle kids through that way. If you take them outdoor, then they're able to do more, right? They're able to have more in a group. So when you get to phase two, that's where there's a little bit more flexibility. You're able to do more with those high risk sports indoors. Okay, so just to be clear about that. So what Russ was talking about is conditioning kids. So if you said to your basketball team, we're not practicing, we're going to condition, different rules apply at that point. And that's why I'm saying if it was me and I'm making that decision for my basketball team and they want to be inside, I would be taking balls away from them. So there is no confusion about what they're doing. And there is no, there's no confusion about whether or not it's an indoor practice against the mandates or it's just conditioning. Okay, so just clarifying that. Thank you, Lauren, for putting in the practice definition right there. So Stacy, the question about the summer 2.0 practices, just to kind of catch up in the chat here. No, anything that's going on in the summertime, going back to regular summer practices, they can't be a condition for participation later on. Those are all optional and don't have any bearing on whether or not a kid gets to play during a regular season. Okay, so that's just real clear there. So that catches us up. And Annette, I like that gator. It's a good one. It's a good one. You can show us what a good gator looks like right there. I like it. Going back into this, is there any other question about the WIA document? And what I know that Mick and the staff are going to be looking for right now, they just have the guidelines, and what they're going to be looking to put together are the sport specific guidelines and get those back up as quick as they can. Also, that's part of what Mick's talking about.
Jeff, really quick, let me ask a question
Sorry,
regarding
go ahead.
volleyball, moderate sport indoors. So as I understand it, 20,000 square foot gym, we can have volleyball in pods of 6 up to 40 kids in a 20,000 square foot gym, because that allocates 500 square feet per kids in a moderate sport. That's doable, right? Is that math correct?
It certainly sounds like it. Certainly sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, so John, then the next catch is, what does brief close contact look like, right? So they're not in each other's bubble that whole time. They come together, do something, boom, they got to spread out. So you just have to be really strategic in structure of the practice, but yeah.
And Jeff, for clarity, just because my volleyball coach already asked me this, again, if you're doing pods of 6, you're not going across the net to another pod of 6. It's not 6-on-6 volleyball where 2 pods can cross into each other. You can have 6 in a pod doing drills, or you can have 6 on one court doing net, but you're not playing 6-on-6 or 5-on-5. You're not cross podding, if that's a word.
No, that
it is now, and you're absolutely right, Bob. That's how they've described it to us.
I think that's going to be a new word for 2021. I'm going to remember that one. No cross pod contamination, that's for sure. So Ryan Helms put a question in about meeting pre-practice requirements. The summer 2.0 practice is not required. No, it can't do it. Your pre-competition practice requirements don't start until the day the season begins. So and if you remember, this fall there was actually a decision made to change those pre-competition practice numbers for every sport. Those are up on the WI website also. The pre-participation requirements by sport they were passed back on November 24th, and they're listed on the COVID planning page under additional resources. So go back and look at that. And what you can see right now is that volleyball, for example, are 5. It's 5 practices. So you got that first week of a 6-week season, and then you got 5 weeks you can compete. Right. So that's what you're looking at right there for the pre-practice. And there we go. Let's see. Any other questions?
Hey, Jeff, if I
Yes,
could, Jay has the question. So volleyball can hit balls in pods of 6, but basketball can't shoot. No, basketball could shoot in the gym as individual drills. That is allowed. It's just, you need to make sure it's managed so they stay in their individual bubble the whole time, where volleyball can be in a bubble of 6. High risk has to be in a bubble of 1 at all times.
Yeah, and
So
that's what, yeah, and thank you for clarifying that. And Jay, you got to remember that the volleyball indoor in phase 1 moderate risk sport, basketball indoor in phase 1 high risk sport are going to be treated differently. Okay, so you got to keep that in mind also.
Well, I guess my question on that is I don't understand how we can allow a pot of 6 to hit a volleyball to each other, but then you go to basketball and we're saying, no. I mean, I'm not asking, okay, so for basketball, I understand it's a high risk sport. I'm not saying that we bring kids in and we go 2-on-2, play 3-on-3, but I don't understand why we can't have 2 kids at a basket, 1 kid shooting, the other kid shagging. I don't see any difference between doing that and having volleyball kids hit balls back and forth to each other. I understand one's moderate and one's high risk, but I mean, looking at that, I that makes no sense to me.
Well, Jay, whether it makes sense or not, looking at the plain language of what the governor has released as the mandate, it is individual in nature, right? And having 2 people participating in the same drill, whether it's 1 shooting and 1 rebounding, unless what you're saying is the individual skill being practiced is 3-point shooting and rebounding. And they're far enough apart that, I don't know if you could if somebody ended up coming in from the governor's office that they would end up and watch that, if they would say that ended up meeting the definition of what they were intending, right? So the plain language says individual in nature, and that's why it's been shared that way today.
And Jay, I totally agree with you. We gave that example. It's really hard for them with their guidance to get that specific. And that would be a question, if I was you, I'd go to my risk manager and say, hey, if half the court's 1 kid's bubble and the other one's the other half, they're not going to be within 10 feet of each other while they're passing. We'll make sure they go separate. Does that qualify? And if your risk management gives you the thumbs up, then you're good to go, that you would be in compliance. And that's an interpretation of that rule. If they say no, then I wouldn't do it. So we're going to run into a lot of situations like that. And again, we want to make sure the state sees us as in compliance, right? I mean, we're challenging where we need to, but we're in compliance, and that would be a way, because ultimately your risk management is the one who needs to stand next to you on that decision. So it's a great question. We did the same thing about 2 girls throwing, getting the arm ready for softball across the gym, right? And same thing, that would work in that setting. So they're not so worried about the transfer contamination on equipment. We have the procedures for cleaning and all that, but so yeah, you're going to run into a lot of those, and so they're great questions.
Not to belabor that horse, but social distancing, we've always said in the guidance coming from the CDC that brief passing is going to be okay. And if we apply that in this principle, and not to say that's going to change the guidelines, but this is no different than kids when they're back in a hybrid or back at school, walking to class and passing each other in the hallway. And I think logic needs to dictate what's going on, but agreed, it's not well defined, and conservative approach is better to keep the activity alive and going than getting it shut down because of potential violation.
Thank you, Russ. I appreciate that too. Anna Harris asked the question about sharing a ball amongst pods, or still no cross podding with equipment. If you have equipment within a pod, or you end up moving it from one pod to another, there is still recommended cleaning protocols for that. So so if one group of 6 is using 2 balls. Before those balls end up going to another pod, it's still recommended that they end up getting cleaned before other kids end up using them right now. Okay, and so just making sure you plan for some of that is important. Hey, there was a different question. It certainly sounds like we can come back to this, but I want to take a break from this discussion for a second. because Brit Attack asked a really important question that I want to give BJ a chance to answer. And it may take us in a different direction for a little while, but if that's the case, I think it's really important to understand what's going on with that. And Brit asked, with the modified timing of seasons, does it affect the eligibility of transfer students this year? And knowing we have the new WI guru of eligibility or gurus of eligibility here, I want to give BJ and Justin an opportunity to talk to us about that right now. So go ahead, BJ.
Thanks, Jeff. In fact, we're getting quite a few questions just around eligibility and transfers now that you guys are kind of getting ready to rock and roll. And I think there's one about previous semester, so don't let me forget to answer. I just want to remind you guys, when you think about transfer students, the transfer rules are based on the day that the student enrolls. So try to not get into the weeds too deep on when the sports seasons are. Don't do that at first. So go to the day the student enrolled in your school and you look back one calendar year. If they did any sports that meet the definition of participation, so that's 10 or more practices or one competition, then they would be ineligible at the varsity level for one calendar year forward. So try to not get too hooked up in when the sports seasons are happening, but focus on the date of enrollment at your school. Look back, and that will impact them forward. That's a very simple answer, but I'm hoping that that kind of helps you. We've gotten a lot of questions about, how this relates to the sports seasons. So I'm hoping that that will help you a little bit. Also keep in mind, when you look back, and let's just say you determine, let's say a kid transfers in December, and when you look back a calendar year, they played basketball. So when you go to hold them accountable forward for a year, there could be 2 basketball seasons. There could be one this spring, and then there could be another one next winter. At this point, it's not the intention of the WI executive board to make them sit out 2 seasons inside that calendar year. So most likely they'll just sit out the season this year, but would not necessarily have to do it next year. So hopefully that helps.
BJ, there was a question in there. Oh, sorry, Jeff. There was a question in there about the if the transfer student didn't participate in varsity sports. And again, as BJ said, you have to, when you look back in that, you have to take into consideration it's not just varsity sports; it's just participation in that sport at any level. So you have to look at the, what level did the student participate in, if they participated, and then did they also participate at the club community level? I think that a lot of times is something that gets missed, especially by newer ADs, but even, a lot of other people kind of miss that too. So you have to look back at community and club levels.
And just keep in mind, the definition of participation is 10 or more practices or one competition. That's what's in our handbook. So I can't really, kind of weigh you a different way. That's what's in the handbook. Remember, if last spring, we did not call that a sports season. So for some reason, last spring, you were able to get in a golf competition. We did determine that last spring doesn't count against the kids. So that's kind of a wash. So hopefully that helps. The paperwork that we have, I think you could trust it and lean on it a little bit. It asks a lot of really direct questions, should help you walk through that a little bit. I do want to touch base on previous semester as well. As you guys remember last spring, long time ago, the OSPI stepped in and put in those no harm rules around education. So the WI executive board fell into place with that. And we said we wouldn't have harm for first semester this school year based on second semester last school year. The reality of the situation is not a lot of kids will maybe benefit from that, because by the time some of you get started, we might be into second semester. It's not our intent to have that roll into another semester. So whatever grades your kids are getting first semester right now will be used when you do previous semester next semester. Sorry, that's kind of confusing. I think that probably helps. So when you are into second semester and you're looking back at previous semester, you will look at first semester and hold them accountable for those grades. But remember, we made 2 waivers. One of them is the suspension is just 3 weeks rather than 5. And the second one is if they receive an incomplete, they can participate during the 5 weeks they are trying to change that incomplete into a passing grade, as long as you're working with them, as long as you're meeting with them, and as long as you're making sure they're on track. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'm handing it back to you, Jeff.
BJ, could you touch on the topic that you and I talked about a transfer student coming in and sitting ineligible and JV only for the fall season, and now in September we have a new fall season and it falls within that calendar year and they're basically going to be ineligible for 2 seasons?
Yeah, it's not the intent of the executive board to have them sit 2 seasons. I don't think we've come out in writing on that, but we did discuss it, and we will definitely discuss it again and make sure that that is where we want to go. And if that's the case, we will put that in writing and get it out to you.
Thanks, BJ.
You're welcome.
In that example, BJ, then would we be advised to just appeal that? The family should appeal that, right? So they don't sit out 2 seasons and go through the process
If by the time next school year comes around and we haven't come out with a real clear statement, then yes, they can appeal it. And keep in mind with eligibility, gang, I mean, there's almost all of our rules can be appealed. So if there's a unique situation, those can be appealed. And again, that process has been made pretty clear as well.
BJ, could you clarify the previous semester? So let's say previous semester ends on February 3rd and we don't play a contest until March 3rd. Are they still sitting 3 weeks, or did their 3 weeks start March 8th or February 8th and they've already expired the 3 weeks before we ever got to a contest because the metrics wouldn't allow it?
Right. I'd have to just go back to the rule. I think, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think the 3 weeks is starting the first day of the new semester.
And so they could already expire that suspension period. And as long as they're meeting the whatever our school district requires as their in-season grade check. So
right.
For us, it's every 4.5 weeks. I do the grade check on that kid. And now in the second semester, they're passing all their classes with a 2.0. They're
Right.
good to go.
Right. And the same thing would happen in a spring sport in a traditional school year, right? The kid,
Correct.
may have already expired their suspension period.
Served it before they ever got to their season.
Right. And I would anticipate that our eligibility committees are going to be, we're going to meet with our chairs next week, but I would anticipate this is going to look different as well. So ADs, if you're getting cases coming in, please communicate with your chairs and kind of work with them a little bit on dates. It's not going to be normal where we do it the first day of the next season, because everybody's seasons are going to be a little different. So we'll try to get something out in the next week or so from eligibility chairs as well.
So BJ and Justin, Suzanne and Stacy both asked questions just to get some further clarification about, club or community sports rules. And I know in my discussions with both of you about this, that what we're really looking at is if somebody, when they hit the age when we start tracking their participation and it affects their eligibility at the high school level, then any community-based club that they end up participating in a sport that is governed by the WIA then becomes relevant to their eligibility when they hit high school age. So just using the sport that everybody knows I'm associated with, using swimming as an example, if I have a kid who swims for a USA swimming club team and swims for one high school and doesn't really want to go to that high school anymore, transfers to the other high school, in talking to them about their eligibility, yeah, okay, full family, hey, it wasn't a full family move. But if I said to that kid, well, tell me what you participated in, and they said, I didn't swim in high school last year, I'm not doing a full questioning of that particular athlete to determine their participation. Because if they actually swam club during their freshman year before they transferred, then what I have to look at is the fact that they're ineligible. Now, if the kid swam 7th grade, swam 8th grade, did not swim the entire 9th grade year, transferred at the end of 9th grade, just, stayed in the same house, but transferred to a new school in 10th grade, then you, like BJ said, you look back the last calendar year, and if they did not swim for that club team in that last calendar year, then you could say, well, okay, I know you were a swimmer, but you weren't in the last calendar year, and therefore you're okay. Now, 10 days, that's all it takes. If that kid quit club halfway through the calendar year and says, but I'm not swimming right now, it's too bad. You still were for half of the year, and so therefore the rule applies to you. Okay, does that help, Suzanne? Does that help, Stacy?
I think, I'm obviously still a little bit new. Can someone give me some clarity of how that became important? The club sports being part of our eligibility at the high schools?
I can speak to two things, I think, Suzanne. One of them is, I think it just comes around recruiting a bit and just a philosophy that maybe kids were playing in a club sport and then therefore they switch schools to go be with those kids and to be with them. The other thing I'll keep in mind is one of the things that I wasn't real familiar with before getting this job is how many kids maybe go to another state and participate with an academy, and then they come back to our state and they look for a 5th year. And when we look back and say, well, you did an entire year with an academy, how that does play a role in our eligibility rules, because they did have the opportunity to participate for an entire year, potentially at an academy. So it's the way the rules are written is it does indicate the definition of participation is 10 or more practices or 1 competition. It doesn't matter if it's school or club. So as of now, because that's the rules, it's what, obviously y'all need to honor. I would suggest that, or remind you that people can appeal that. We've had that get brought forward in an appeal in the past. So it's what's in our book. So that's what we follow.
And it would be one that if you're interested in really exploring that some more, you can do some research. We can do so, and I'd be happy to help you with that, Suzanne. At some point, we can do some research historically with that element of the eligibility rules, just to see when it went into effect, and then we can go back and look at the pros and cons of why it was actually voted in, and then make a determination about whether or not it's still relevant today. Right. So that's, but as BJ said, it's on the books right now, which ends up kind of segueing into the conversation that's kind of taking place in the chat right now about 7-on-7 football. It's the same thing. It's actually been, declared right now that 7-on-7 is considered football under our current rules, under the WIC, handbook and the current rules. In part because of similar, obviously the skills of passing and running routes and coverage and all of those kind of things that are actually practiced during that time, which is part of why the amendment that is being put forth this year for 7-on-7 and sand volleyball and a couple others to be looked at as different sports, is actually there for us to discuss. So, so for right now, can we end up saying to people, hey, go play 7-on-7 football outside of, your fall season, when your football season is being played? The answer is no. You can't let your coach just go do that with your kids, without making sure that he's following, all the WI rules that are in place. But it's going to be an important conversation as we start to bring up amendments. So what that does, half an hour left. I certainly, hear the horse whinnying kind of softly. We've been beating it pretty good for an hour and a half right now about what this guidance looks like. So if we want, we can change directions right now and end up talking about amendments for 15 or 20 minutes if people have questions about any of the amendments that are up. So I'm gonna leave it there. I am blown away by the fact that there were over 160 people on the call this morning. So I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. You tell me if you want to keep talking about guidance, we can do that. If you want to, end up moving to amendment discussions, we can do that. So So let's kind of finish up the guidance discussion then. So Rock, to answer your question, the answer is yes. There are some leagues that have decided to go to 2 seasons and stack sports. If you look at the Seattle Times, there is an article right now in the high school section, in their coronavirus section also, about the Metro League's decision that was announced yesterday to go to 2 longer seasons and stack their sports. So Metro is going to do that. I think they're finalizing how they're going to take care of the 15 schools that are in their league, putting together specific schedules and everything else like we talked about before. And leagues moving to spring season first, that I haven't heard, Carrie. I haven't heard specifically of any league saying they're going to get their spring sports out of the way first. I know that has been advocated by some parents and by some coaches to say, let's get them going before anybody else. But I haven't heard of anybody saying we're going to prioritize spring season first yet. So somebody, if that's wrong or somebody is doing that, please jump in. Okay, it's enough wait time. So let's move to amendments for a few minutes, and just see if there's anybody who has taken a look at the amendments as in the excitement of everything else being released. And if so, are there questions? Are there certain amendments that you like, that you would love to talk about? Let's just open it up. And thank you, Ryan, for giving. Ryan Sherlock just gave some update. That's what Metro is doing. Yeah, and I'll share my screen right now so we can end up looking at amendments too. I was failing at multitasking at that point. So there we go. Hopefully you can see them now. So you can see the one we were just talking about. Amendment 1 would add flag football, 7-on-7 football, and sand volleyball to the sports are considered to be separate and distinct from the WI's offerings. High school amendment 2, goes back to the athlete following a club or community-based coach or trainer and ruling them ineligible. We saw that a year ago. The third amendment proposal, updating language in the handbook regarding appeals of eligibility regarding gender equity. It's one I'm especially proud of, the work that the Gender Equity Committee ended up doing to put that forward. The amendment 4, 1B and 2B schools utilizing 8th graders from non-WI member middle schools. The 5th one you can see there, 1A high schools utilizing 8th graders. Amendment 6, 1823-1 gets into that community-based sport and the sometimes the push-pull from our athletes and their community-based participation, and changes the definition of regular and providing special treatment, changes the definition of regular from no more than once to no more than once per week. Amendment 7 proposal, it's adding a minimum of an hour of coaches standards for student mental health and diversity, equity, and inclusion education. So, and if, I'm sorry, I didn't get the chat up. So if there are specific questions, here we go, a couple others. High school basketball teams participating in 20 games or 19 games plus 1 tournament that would allow them to go up to 23. Foundation game, a WI foundation game that I believe they're going to try and kick back off in the next year that we have a regular year, would not count towards the total. And then we get to the last 2 there, eliminate. And so football, the eliminating the 20 days of coaching for summer football, that limitation, the restriction is limited. And then 2-day wrestling tournament consisting of brackets larger than 16 for wrestling there. So those are what the amendments are. I'll give you a chance to digest that. We'll come back to any of them that you want to talk about. And in the meantime, we do have Mr. Winter Coalition with us today too. So Andy Barnes, if you want to tell us what the Winter Coalition is going to look like here in a couple of weeks, that would be great.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I just wanted to run through the format of Winter Coalition so everybody understood kind of how we're doing it. Obviously, with being in a Zoom format, there are some limitations to what we can do as far as discussion is concerned, and wanting to give everybody the opportunity to provide input. And we felt the best way to do that is that the rep assembly members are the voice for the membership and for the amendments. So as it stands right now, the only people in the actual meeting for Winter Coalition will be the rep assembly members, executive board, district directors, staff, and the honorary board members. But we are providing an opportunity, a platform for anybody to view the meeting. But as far as discussion is concerned, questions, anything like that, please make sure you run those through your rep assembly members because they're going to be the only ones technically in the meeting. But we will provide some sort of platform for people to view the discussion. They just won't be a part of the meeting.
So Andy, can I ask one specific question?
Yeah.
If an author of an amendment is not a rep assembly member, are those individuals going to be invited to be part of the meeting as well?
Yes, I should have added that in. If there was anybody who wrote an amendment who is not, they will be included with that. Cindy has reached out to all of the authors to make sure that they'll be included, and they will be sent the link to get in the meeting as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anybody have any questions for Andy about rep assembly? Let's make sure we understand what happens at the rep assembly also. At the rep assembly, what ends up taking place is the amendments as you see them in this particular document that's posted right now are what is discussed. And what is voted on is whether or not those particular amendments as they are written need to be A, amended, or B, passed along for the rep assembly to vote on, or C, need to be taken off of the list of amendments that need to be voted on this year. So one of those three things end up taking place on the floor at the rep assembly. So if you're reading these and you believe that there is some tweak to the language that is key to making this particular rule or a particular amendment, if it got voted into a rule, work the way it needs to, then you need to get to your rep assembly member and talk to that individual about what that tweak would look like and provide them with that language, because that's the only place it could happen. Okay, if it doesn't happen there, it doesn't happen at all. And then we're talking about things the way they are written as you see them here. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, and then afterwards, after the rep assembly is up, there is going to be multiple opportunities to discuss the amendments that will end up going forward for an official vote. That's where Mick and Andy and others have shared that during the WSSAAA Wednesdays, there'll be some time set aside. And what I'll commit to is in these extension conversations, taking on one or two and making it real clear which ones we'll be talking about to give people an opportunity to end up discussing, hearing things from across the state, taking into consideration other people's thoughts about it, how it may affect different levels or classifications of school, and making sure that we have a really robust conversation about each of these before they get voted on later this spring. Okay. All right. So leaving that, is there any amendment right now that anybody wants to spend a little bit of time talking about? First come, first serve. You got one, give me the number and I'll end up rolling to the actual language of it. It's eerily quiet. I don't know if that means that that everybody believes these aren't really controversial in nature and they're pretty straightforward, or if folks still need some time to digest what they're seeing there.
Hey, Jeff, Cindy, if you're on the call, you want to talk a little bit about the process potentially to adjust amendments as needed? If she's not here, I'm happy to do it. doesn't sound like Cindy's here. I just want to share with you all that because we're doing this rep assembly via Zoom, it seems like it might be a little more difficult for people to kind of have those intimate conversations, make a proposal of new language or adjusted language. And so Cindy is asking if there are pockets around the state or people that are interested in changing or adjusting some of the language to please work with her the best you can in advance. Also recognize that sometimes during that day and conversations that things will come up, and we will do the best we can to kind of figure out how to work through that. But if you intend on making a proposed change, please work with Cindy in advance. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. All right. Well, based on the conversation that we had earlier on, I'm gonna stop sharing the amendments, and I'm gonna circle back. And the last thing that we can spend some time talking about is just making sure everybody is real clear that there is on the WI's COVID site, there is a link to a document that's called the Request to Change Scheduled Sports Season. And that is the Google, it'll take you to a Google form that you can fill out. That's going to end up, giving you an opportunity to share information with the WI about what it is that you'd like to do, and what that's going to end up looking like. Okay. So as you guys are finalizing your plans, as your league is finalizing your plans, you need to make sure that your league understands that particular link and you're able to get back in there. And have the appropriate league representative actually get that filled out. And then I've heard some things about individual schools having to do some things as well. So Mick, maybe you can share if you want to have, I'll use Gig Harbor just as one that pops to my mind. If Gig Harbor is separating out from their league, do they need to then send a separate request to do something different to you, just to keep track of what schools are doing and where they're going?
Yeah, we would appreciate getting that information, just so we can keep track and others will know, because the Google page that was created will track all that for us. And it would also help maybe in some communication situations when we get calls. So we would appreciate anybody varying from that, just to fill out that form quickly and let us know. Obviously, a school district does not have to participate with anyone else if they so choose. So. Okay.
Thank you. And if you guys have any questions about that, you can reach out to Mick. You can, or you can ask me, and I'm happy to help find the answer for you about what you should be doing for your league or your school. So let's address one last thing, and then I think I'm gonna cut everybody loose a little bit before 10 o'clock here. Next Wednesday is a historic day. 20th of January, presidential inauguration. It's going to be a day I think all of us have some deep-seated personal feelings about what that day is going to look like and what the days leading up to it are going to look like. And without getting uber political here, I think it's something that all of us as individuals who work with kids and work with our communities, we should be watching, because what's going to happen is going to affect the kids that we work with, is going to affect the families we work with. And we need to make sure that we are in tune with what's happening around us, and not stay so super focused on this one element of what we do that we lose sight of the larger picture. And that is, really taking care of who we are as people and what that means to the communities around us. So next Wednesday, the WSSAAA Wednesday, is going to be 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. It is a hard stop at 9 a.m. So that people can turn on the news, can turn on C-SPAN, can turn on whatever they need to watch what's going on. That gives us a full hour and a half. It is going to be a power-packed hour and a half. There's a guest speaker that's lined up. There's a usual WSSAAA Wednesday bit with a much better host than myself, because he's figured out music. And definitely gets you guys dialed in that way. With whatever little bit of time we have left over, also there'll be some chance to kind of follow up and make sure everybody is feeling okay about league plans, if there are specific questions. I think what I'll probably do just to help guide some of the discussion about amendments is potentially put together a Microsoft Forms just to, to throw it out to folks so that if there are questions ahead of time about amendments, we can start gathering them that way. Other than that, folks, here's what I'm going to say to you. This has been, and we talk about this 9 months, now going on 10 months, 11 months almost. It has been unique. It has been surreal, and it's been exhausting. And that's on the good end of things. On the bad end of things, it is maddening to see what goes on around us, and to wonder why decisions are made here the way they are. And I'm going to tell you how I've tried to center myself about that. And I look at it this way: we live in a great state. We live in the great state of Washington. We live here for a reason. I don't know what it's like to live in a lot of I lived in a lot of places in my life growing up, but there are a lot of places I don't know what it's like to live there. What I do know is what it's like to live in Washington, and what I do believe we have the ability to do based on the information that's been given to us right now, as restrictive as it may be, is to tap into the absolute skill set that is at the forefront right now. And we have the ability to be creative. I know that just looking at the faces and the names that are on this call. We have the ability to lean on one another, and we have the ability to keep one thing at the forefront. And that one thing that's at the forefront is that we serve the kids in our own community, but larger than that, we have an absolute responsibility to do what's right for the kids in our community in a way that is going to end up making things better for kids in the surrounding communities as well. I appreciate the conversations. I appreciate the work that the executive board is doing. Like I said, I'm absolutely humbled that 165 of you or so jumped onto a call this morning and take almost 2 hours out of your morning to be part of these conversations. And what I will continue to commit to is answering questions. I took 3 or 4 phone calls already this week. If people want to talk, if you guys just want to kind of throw something up against the wall and see if it makes sense, I'm always happy to take a phone call and end up talking to folks about what you're dealing with, and just lend an ear, so to speak. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to do something for our kids. But at the same time, what I do not want any of us to do is to give kids false hope, lead them down a path that ends up doing more harm at the end than good. So you guys are well versed in what you need to do right now. And like I said, if there's anything I can continue to do for you, please let me know. We have mentors in each one of the districts. They can be tapped to end up getting back to you guys and end up helping you also. With 10 minutes left, let me know if there's anything that you guys would like to hear between now and next week. Otherwise, for whatever reason, the sun's starting to come out in Bellevue. I may stare out the window for 10 minutes and just bask in what is some sunlight for a little while. So anything for the good of the order from anybody.
Jeff, Wednesday is our hot topics meeting that we have as an exec staff. So we'll go through the chat and make sure that if there's anything that needs clarification, we'll make sure we can get it added. We got some questions we have to get to DOH and governor's office, but we'll try to get some of these things clarified for everybody.
Thank you, Andy.
Hey, Jeff.
Dave Ticker.
Yeah, just want to say thank you from everybody about how you're facilitating this and your wisdom about all the questions and fielding things and trying to sort things out. Not everybody can do this, and you really have a gift, and appreciate your leadership. And not an easy time, and not easy questions, and I know sometimes it feels like we're spinning our wheels, but the good news is everybody's trying to move forward, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Just briefly, we have our board meeting today. We're going to be talking about our state conference that we've officially moved to June 23rd. I've secured the facility. I've secured the hotels. There'll be more information that I'll send out to everybody about that. What hotels, there's going to be a few more hotels that we get to choose from, just because there's obviously in the Tri-Cities area, there's lots of activity in the summertime. So we will be okay, but we'll share some more information with you so people can start getting registered. And actually really looking forward to being all in person again. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have the conference, and I have Mick Hoffman's personal credit card. So Mick is going to be responsible for the first round for everybody. And thanks, Mick.
That's great, Dave. I have Mr. Underhill's credit card. So I'll be buying multiple rounds after that, along with some steak sandwiches. So let me say two things to you, Dave, just on a lighter note. I appreciate the fact that you have the tropical background. But when you had up a little earlier, I was wondering if that was actually a picture of you in that yoga pose. Because if it was, I was going to just bow down right there. So
actually, that was Tim Graham. Couldn't you tell? That was when he was in training.
That's awesome. I love it. No, Tick, I really, I'll end up saying this also. There is a, I feel blessed that I get to sit on the NIAAA's mentoring committee. We have a meeting next week. I'll get to talk to, about 8 other athletic directors from across the country. And the one thing that becomes more and more apparent is just how lucky we are in the state of Washington that WSSAAA is the organization it is. And a great deal of that has to do with the fact that you are a forward-thinking individual and are doing everything you can to make sure that we have opportunities to continue to connect together as well. So thank you for everything that you and the board, the WSSAAA board, are doing to give us an opportunity to get back together and spend mixed money. I think that that's actually something that all of us would definitely look forward to at the end of the school year. And like I said, it's a great state for a lot of reasons, and WSSAAA is one of those reasons. So thanks to everybody. I appreciate it. Like if there's something, I know I've gotten a few emails. Those of you who sent me emails while this has gone on this morning, I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And if there's other things that come up, like I said, I am completely open to a phone call or setting up a Teams meeting and talking to you guys one-on-one if it would end up being helpful. So love the fact that sun's shining other places in the state too. You guys get outside, look up, soak some of that in, find something positive today, and we'll see you next week for sure.